Assalamualaikum and good morning to all participants and also Salam Ramadan. First of all, thank you for joining us today in FDL Online Seminar. So today, Professor Dr. Noazah Yusof will give her talk entitled Possible Diagnostic Methods for COVID-19, a review on the commercial, emerging and previously developed detection techniques of similar viruses. So without further delay, please welcome Prof. Noazah Yusof.
Thank you, Dr. Intan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning to all. I would like to thank Ion 2, formerly known as ITMA, for giving me the opportunity to share the literature review that I have done starting from second day of MCO. So according to Scopus, search from the second day of MCO, which is around 19th of March, there are actually around 600 over papers already published on COVID-19, but most of it are on the, which is a 98% on the medical aspect, epidemiologies, clinical symptoms. So there is one or two papers on detection method. But as of today, if we Google COVID-19 in Scopus, we can find around 6,700 papers. And if we narrow down that to COVID-19 detection, there are only around 244 or 277, if I'm not mistaken, number of papers related to COVID-19 detection. But if we go into detail, it's not actually detection. Out of those 277, probably 10 papers only on the diagnostic methods. So however, I will try to discuss the possible techniques and the current one. What are the issues? The commercial one, the companies that have developed the antibody-based, antigen-based, as well as the improved RT-PCR, and as well as the emerging, means the latest one being published for COVID-19. So this is the face of the enemy. If you put these pictures side by side with serial killer, I'm not sure which one that we feared more, whether this simple guy or the serial killer. So very important for us to focus on this morphology or the structure. Very important to take note on the spike protein and the N protein. Okay, so we have to get to know we need to get to know the enemy, and the detection system. In terms of detection system, it is very important to focus on spike as well as the N protein. So this is the general morphology of coronavirus, be it SARS, SARS-CoV-1, or MERS-CoV coronavirus, as well as SARS-CoV-2. The general structure is like this. So the difference in terms of the gene. Okay. So the problem with coronavirus is RNA virus. So RNA virus is prone to mutation. So the development of detection system is quite tricky because of the RNA as well as the mutation of the RNA virus. So those two things are very important. the spike protein as well as the N protein. Okay, to understand better on how we can detect, previously is the morphology, and we can see the infection mechanism. Okay, it is between receptor and we call this ligand. So the affinity of between the ligand, which is the virus itself, and the receptor ACE2, which is known as in full is angiotensin converting enzyme, which convert angiotensin 2 to angiotensin. And these are common in medicine for blood pressure as well as for those who have heart problem. So there are at some stage there are certain issues for those who are taking blood pressure med as well as heart disease. A bit of afraid that it might induce the possibility of severe infection because of the ACE2 receptor for coronavirus 2. So you can see the most important that play the role of infection in this case is the spike protein. So the spike protein and ACE2 is like lock and key. So the spike is the key and the ACE2 is the lock. So once the virus enter the cell, then the replication started. So ACE2 is abundant in lung cell as well as intestines. That's why we have reported cases of diarrhea, because it is also abundant in small intestine. Okay, and there are reported that the ACE2 also is abundant in oral mucosa cell. So the issue is we still do not have vaccine, and we still do not have the efficient or proven drugs. So how do we move on? We have to balance between the economy as well as life. So how do we choose, economy or the survival of life or the survival of human being? So at this moment, the best practice is to have physical distancing, social distancing, and hygiene practice. But how are we going to control that, that people will continue to physically space themselves and do not forget to wash their hands, avoid touching surfaces, because we definitely need to use elevators. We definitely have to touch tables. We definitely have to engage with people. And how do we move on from that situation? Because according to the research, even though Oxford University has started the vaccine clinical testing, it is going to be another a year or probably 2 years when the vaccine will be available. And even though if it is available, I'm not sure, well, we're not sure whether Malaysia can get it as soon as possible. Okay, right. People has talked about repurposing old drugs, and as of now, none of the repurposed drug has fully being very effective to treat the COVID-19 patients. So another possibility is the testing. Like WHO has mentioned, test, test, and test. So is it possible to test everybody? Is it possible to test everybody before they go out to work, before they go out for normal life after this? Think about the schools. Schools are going to be very packed. Okay, we cannot control the class because most of the classes, around 30 students, might be 40 students. and they are children. You cannot really set them apart. It's difficult to control, right? So this is test kits or testings is the possibility of us to go back to the normal, test and isolate the one that is infected. Okay, to understand the strategy in detecting, we have to understand the biomarkers that exist in the infected patient. So as you can see, this is considered day zero, where the people or the human being affected. Okay, and this is a process where the DNA, the virus is replicating. Okay, the incubation time, and then it's not really clear. Some reported 14 days, some reported 7 days before the symptom, the onset of the symptom. The onset of the symptom, probably some has fever, some has cough, and there are other reported symptoms as well. So as you can see, the IgM will only appear after, it might be 7 days, it might be 14 days, and as well as after IgM is IgG. So very important for us to understand this curve for researchers to be able, or for the companies to be able to come up with a rapid test kit. So this is the current status in Malaysia as of reported 11 May. I didn't put the 12th May yesterday. So we're not really in the safe zone yet. Yesterday was the lowest, 16 new cases. But sporadic is even though it is low, sporadic cases, but still it is scary. And yesterday, some YouTube videos showing that there is a second outbreak at Wuhan, as well as there is a number of cases increase in South Korea. This is due, in South Korea, they opened the nightclub. So after the opening of nightclub, there's a spike of 30 cases. Well, definitely people have to physically distance themselves until we have the cure or the vaccine. So this is the gold standard. So imagine that whenever that Ministry of Health held a press conference, previously they will mention there are some thousands of cases of pending for results. So probably we are asking why does it have to be thousands of pending cases? Okay, if you listen to BBC reporting on UK status, or listen to President Trump, the first thing that they mention is how many tests they have done. So up to now, they have done 100,000 of tests or 900,000 of tests. That's the first thing that they mention in their press conference. They don't mention about the positive cases, but they highlight about a number of tests being carried out in their countries. So you can imagine now the sample collection started is either throat swab or nasopharyngeal sample. And the steps from here, extraction of the RNA, and then purification, which is not shown here. And after purification is the reverse transcription by an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. Because RNA is not stable, it has to be converted to cDNA, okay, and followed by amplification. So amplification process involve polymerase, where the DNA is amplified, and currently they are using probe, fluorescence probe, where you can see originally the probe will be in close proximity to the quencher. Sorry, this is the quencher, this is the fluorescent probe. So if the sample is a match, okay, and there'll be amplification of DNA. So this fluorescent probe will be released. So the fluorescence intensity will be getting higher. So if it is not released, then the quencher will quench the fluorescence probe. You can see the fluorescent intensity is constant. That means it is negative. But however, we have to think about the process along the way, the extraction, the purification, and there are addition of some chemicals or some enzymes. And during that process, there might be some contamination. So based on our experience, using fluorescence probe is prone to be quenched by any organic compound exists in the vials or in the during the detection. So if it is if there is a contamination that affect the fluorescence properties, you might end up a false negative result. So even though this is possible, RT-PCR is still the most convincing technique for COVID-19 or novel coronavirus detection. But the issues are, the steps are tedious and you have to do it meticulously. So this is the the detail of the steps. So sampling requires an expert people to sample the swab, the throat swab, as well as nasopharyngeal sample, and then the extraction as well as the purifications. You can see this is the extraction method. Okay, this is the sampling method, and then the converting the RNA to cDNA, and followed by amplification and fluorescent. There are many other techniques, but here I'm talking about fluorescent, the TechMan probe. So you can see the price for RT-PCR is expensive. The time of analysis is probably, if you have a very efficient, probably 6 hours, but most of it is 24 hours. So probably the day after you can have the results done. But if you just Google YouTube looking at RT-PCR steps, it is very, a lot of things, a lot of steps has to be done before you can get results. And the price is, all the reagents are expensive. This is in US dollar. Okay. And at one stage in Wuhan hospitals, because of the because in order for them to isolate the patients, they have to wait for the lab results, and because it is not fast enough for them, they decided to have CT scan as a mean of diagnosing COVID-19. So you can see with the CT scan, there is a glassy opaque images after 3 days. Okay, this is this is D. After 3 days, there's opaque glassy images here, and this is it seems that it is very reliable technique to diagnose that it is COVID-19. It is very unique to COVID-19. So at one stage, the Wuhan hospital has used this as means to detect, to diagnose the COVID-19 patient. Okay. So let us move on to one of the most popular rapid test kit being developed is based on antibody response of the patient. And on 11th of May, a press conference by the DG, the Director General of Ministry of Health, Dr. Nisha mentioned about this IgG, IgM test kit shouldn't be used as the mean to diagnose. It might be used for later stage where you can evaluate the severity of certain region. I would agree to that because you can see that IgG, okay, IgM and IgG, the onset appears only after probably 7 days and 40 days after the incubation period. So during this incubation period, the infected patient can already shred the virus, means it can already spread the virus without knowing that he or she has been infected. So if the IgG, IgM test kit being used, then it is possibly too late. The patient already, the infected person already being walking around us, spreading the virus without knowing it. Okay, so most of the antibody test kits, IgG, IgM test kits are based on lateral flow. So that is another issue because from our experience, the use of lateral flow, even though it is very user-friendly, very easy to use, it is very less sensitive compared to other technique. You have to imagine that this is the blood or the serum sample and it has to move here, conjugation pad, where it will bind, or the antigen will bind with the goal and antibody, and then it goes here to bind with the matched antibody if it is IgG or IgM that is in the blood sample. Okay, so it works like the pregnancy test kit. Okay, so for us to really observe by naked eye the test lines is actually quite difficult based on our experience. The viral load, the amount of virus the amount of antibody, in the serum or in the blood must be very high for these lines to appear. If it is not high enough, then you might end up thinking there's no line, so I'm not positive. But because of the amount of the antibody is not enough for it to be visible to our naked eye. So be careful when you are using lateral flow because it has a very low sensitivity. So that's why WHO is not recommending these test kits, even though people start using it and some has started to commercialize it. These are some of the companies that has currently commercialized the IgG, IgM test kits. You can see there are various sensitivity and specificity. So it is not here, but it should be around here that we have SD biosensor. I don't know why it is being cut off. Because it's too big. Right? So SD biosensor is the one that the company from Korea that is supplying Malaysia with the rapid test kit. So I'm not sure whether they are giving us supplying antigen test kits or antibody test kit. I'm not sure. Okay, it is supposed to be in the list, but I don't know why it is out of the list. SD biosensor. So the issues definitely the sensitivity reported by WHO, it might be 34% to 80%. So we cannot afford to have this false negative issues in diagnosing COVID-19, because if we are to declare this person is free of COVID-19, but in fact it is positive, then he or she will be walking around spreading the virus. So again, it is too late by using the antibody response based on the IgG, IgM test kits. So there is another rapid test kit, and which is much better than the antibody test kits. And why it is much better? Because you can see this is the curve where the IgG, IgM biomarkers in the affected patient. But when we are talking about antigen tests, we are talking about the real time, meaning that starting from the infection, then we can start to detect the N protein as well as the S protein, because that is the one that in the virus itself. So antibody, which is specific to the S protein and N protein, can be developed and is already commercially available for us researchers and for those companies to use the antibody that is specific to N protein and S protein to be mounted on the sensor. Regardless of what kind of sensor, you can use the N protein as well as the S protein antibody. And they have now developed even monoclonal antibodies, which is much more specific to the biomarker, which is in this case N protein and S protein. And people have started to develop aptamer as well. So aptamer must be very good. If not, then we end up with again a false positive or false negative, most probably false negative. Okay, so this is antigen based technique. Okay, we go back the same principle, because most of the companies are looking at the most the cheapest user-friendly technique. So they are proposing again the strip-based the lateral flow technique. So instead of instead of antibody, which is the response of the body, we can replace the antibody which is specific to the antigen, which is the N protein as well as the S protein. And the big difference here is the sample is not the blood, but the sample has to be the throat swab and the nasopharyngeal swab. It's not blood for antigen detection. And unfortunately, because the companies are really going towards the lateral flow, and as I have mentioned before, lateral flow is not sensitive enough. Okay, so the viral load means the amount of virus must be enough for that to have the visible these lines to be visible to naked eye. If it is not enough, then the lines will not be visible. It's difficult to look at it. It's difficult to really look at it and get a very nice line. So it's not as easy as people mentioned. You just drop and then it flows and you get a very nice line. No, it doesn't work that way. Okay, based on our experience, it's sometimes very difficult to observe a very nice line to confirm that it is positive or negative. Okay. So this is the issue with antigen test kit using the lateral flow, is the poor sensitivity. So there are a few companies, including SD Biosensor, RapidGen, Coris Bioconcept, who has developed this antigen-based test kit. So antigen-based test kit is supposed to be better than the antibody test kits, because it is real-time detection. It is detecting the virus, not detecting the antibody response of the patient. However, the technique must be very sensitive. So at this moment, using the lateral flow is not sensitive enough. Okay, and there is a other possibility of the biomarker itself. The antibody developed, be it polyclonal or monoclonal, it has to be good. It has to be good before, to be used in the production of the lateral flow. If the antibody, monoclonal or polyclonal, or probably aptamer is not good enough, then the reaction, the test kit is not going to be very good. So this is a few issues in terms of how good is the test kit being developed. So definitely clinical study, a lot of samples has to be carried out side by side with RT-PCR. So hundreds of samples should be tested, and what is the compliance of these test kits with the standard method of RT-PCR. This has to be reported before we can use these test kits. Okay, so the same principle being used for antigen test kit. So for based on my Scopus analysis for the detection, there are few emerging techniques, which is actually very practical, but definitely it is difficult to make it commercial. Okay, so remember the use of RT-PCR. So RT-PCR requires amplification, requires thermocycler. Okay, so instead of using RT-PCR, which requires thermocycler is used to regulate the temperature so that the DNA will be amplified. So LAM is an isothermal nucleic acid amplification. So it doesn't require thermocycler, but still you need to have a heater, okay? But at least it is isothermal. And it requires the design of a few primers, loop primers. Okay, I'm not really a microbiologist, so I'm a chemist. So the most important part is to design the LAM primers. We have to design 5 to 6 primers before we can have this technique being done. So this LAM is possible to replace the RT-PCR. So once we have the primers and we have the heating instruments, what we need, definitely the extraction of RNA is still needed. The purification of the RNA is still needed. The amplification is being done by LAM. And we can also combine the LAM with other techniques, like in this case, combining LAM with lateral flow. So this will be an exciting alternative detection system because it is still based on the virus, not based on the antibody, not based on S protein or N protein, but then it is based on the virus itself. And instead of using complicated RT-PCR, expensive, we can replace it with LAM, okay? But that depends on how good your primers are, okay? The primers can be designed via some software, so then we can test it in the lab. So this is the advantages of using LAM. As you can see, RT-PCR requires thermocycler, can be, whereas LAM, you can continuously amplify, less reagents, okay? And it is one pot reaction. It can be one pot reaction. It can be combined with, for example, just now combined with lateral flow technique. It can be combined with microarray, as well as any other methods to detect the existence of the virus. Okay. So this is example, probably the whole idea of using LAM, okay, the biological sample, whether it's throat swab or nasopharyngeal, okay, and then extraction, reaction mixture, LAM master mix means and then these are the process and incubate. So what you can see the instruments that we need, it's not actually instruments, the accessories that we need here is the water bath, okay? And after the amplification, we can either use this fluorescent dye to conclude whether it's positive or negative, or you can combine it with lateral flow, electrochemical technique, microarray, gel analysis, is up to you, okay? So we have experience working with dengue virus. So because dengue virus is also RNA virus. So let me show you what happened here. So this is dengue virus. It's a culture cell for dengue. And then the process is starting from converting the RNA to cDNA. And we actually tried using two methods. One is with RT-PCR before using our electrochemical sensor. RT-PCR is for the amplification. We also tried using without amplification at all. Without amplification, without purification, only converting the DNA to cDNA, RNA to cDNA, and directly using the electrochemical sensors. So there are a few issues. It is doable, but there are a few issues. So we actually love to try this on COVID-19, but definitely we need money as well as time to do this. Because the electrochemical sensors are working with dengue, and we also have tried this with clinical samples using this electrochemical technique for tuberculosis. So we proposed the idea of this is antigen test. Just now is this is still DNA, okay, DNA based test, and we can use antigen test using electrochemical sensor. So we just have to replace the set of antibody to be selective towards SARS-CoV-2. Okay, in this case, we can focus on N protein as well as S protein. Okay. So this method has been proven on our detection for tuberculosis, and we have actually done some clinical study. It is in fact very promising. This is the detail of how it is constructed on the surface of the electrode. Okay, so the design of antibodies is must be very selective towards the SARS-CoV-2 or the N protein or S protein. And the steps are very simple. These are based on the tuberculosis detection that we have done. So you can imagine if we have the throat swab or the nasopharyngeal sample, what is needed is to have the breakdown of the sample here by using sodium hydroxide and incubation, okay? And we can have the tagging, and it can be detected directly. So the whole, because of the incubation and the whole process, is actually took around 1 hour, 1.5 hours. And this is a very exciting technology, which is being developed by Broad Institute. So Broad Institute is a combination, is a research institute combined MIT and Harvard. So you can imagine the brains that been pulled there. It's a combination of MIT and Harvard. So they have recently developed this 2 years ago for using CRISPR. So CRISPR is gene editing technique, and they have developed a sensor based on CRISPR. And recently they have published this CRISPR technique called Sherlock. It's exciting. The name is exciting. Sherlock, the name of the private investigator. Sherlock technique to detect coronavirus. You can Google this YouTube. They have published a video on how the mechanism of this CRISPR. And then they also, this is the link where you can look at the research protocol. I even have the whole papers on published in Nature. They have published in Nature on this CRISPR technique. This is, I think, the most emerging techniques in biosensing. So there are other papers as well. So as I said before, up to now, there are only less than 10 papers that really work on detection of SARS-CoV-2. But I think the previous techniques being applied on detection of SARS itself, MERS, coronavirus itself is also applicable to be applied for SARS-CoV-2. So these are papers, and you can see the name mostly South Korean. This is a field effect transistor, and they are using antigen-based. They are using antigen-based, but the method is field effect, FET, field effect transistors. And again, you can see the loop, the LAM, reverse, the LAM technique being used. This is also by researchers from South Korea. And excitingly, we have researchers from Malaysia. And detection and diagnosis system using IoT-based smart glass. When I read, because I cannot download the whole paper, when I read it, it is based on face detection, diagnosing based on the fever, I think the temperature. So I'm not sure what is actually the detail of their mechanism. I don't think it's a sensing the COVID-19, but possibly screening those who have fever or not having fever. So you can see less than 10 papers, and this is the two. There are 3 or 4 papers on LAM technique itself, and there are around 3 or 4 papers on the improved RT-PCR. They have improved the RT-PCR to make it more efficient, to make it more less time consuming, because they develop multiplex detection system. So those are reported, and you can Google it in Scopus. So I think this is the one that really using antigen test coupled with a new method, not to say this is common method, but this is not really just lateral flow or field strip test. It is coupled with a proper transducer, which is FET at this moment. And the rest are LAM techniques. And there are a few papers on review techniques, as well as the CRISPR paper, one CRISPR paper. Okay. So conclusion is, it is our hope that this review that we have presented, and we also have written a paper on the review, but still being rejected twice. It's okay. Will give the idea to the readers and the researchers on possibility of development of SARS-CoV-2 virus detection or COVID-19 diagnosis. But however it is, the sensitivity and the selectivity of the test should not be compromised, because it is very dangerous to have false negative as well as false positive. So the clinical testing of means that the testing developed should be validated side by side with the RT-PCR, and it must be reliable before the commercial production can be made available as soon as possible. So there are a few techniques that I can share. These are the references that I have searched in the Scopus as well. You can see still on using RT-PCR, IgG, IgM, CRISPR technique, LAM technique, and this is antigen test, nucleocapsid protein, the N protein. Okay, these are all recent, 2020. And I think that will be the end. So this is more than 30 minutes. Sorry about that. And hope that we can push these test kits, which is the one that is reliable, so we can move on, so we can have everybody tested, so we can we will not sacrifice the economy, and especially children's, they have to go to school. Even though the online classes, the Google Classroom is happening, but it's not really as effective as I also have to homeschool one of my children, so it's not really, it is very challenging. I'm sure that the parents out there understand. So thank you to Ayontu, Dr. Intan. I think